And they're light minor.
Well, that's what he explained to me. He said, the newer skates now, the more you pay, the more Kevlar they have.
Yeah, I
So
already got that.
that's what you're looking at in those straps are different.
Okay, I just sent a standard response.
It's not like you're down on the ice and,
Yeah,
you know,
I
and
get
it's
off
axed.
the toe by old skates and think I'm going to die. I haven't tried it on these new ones.
Okay, good afternoon. We're going to call the committee of the whole agenda, or meeting to order, sorry. I don't believe there's any additions or amendments there too. So a motion to adopt the agenda would be in order.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion is carried. No delegations or minutes of meetings. We do have a planning and building departmental report for the last quarter of last year. So for receipt, the motion would be in order.
Second.
On receipt then, all those in favor? Motion is carried. Any questions, comments for planner? Yes, Tom.
On page 1 of the report, you know, we see under ongoing, Balmoral Avenue, 2 lots and 1200 Military Row. And then underneath that, the same 2 properties are under closed. I was just wondering how they appear in both.
Our planner can respond.
Certainly, under Balmoral, there were 2 separate applications. So there was an application, and it was processed, and then it expired. So that's why it's showing, and then a subsequent application came in. Under Military Row, we've got the 2-lotter and the closed one. Sorry, I'm just going to find it. And that one, I don't, off the top of my head, recall, but it would more than likely be something similar. Either that or there was a change.
Oh, okay.
So, yes.
Well, that answers my question, and thank you.
Okay, Councilor Fletcher?
Thank you. Just in relation to page 9, the DP for the cell tower, I just know that the regional district had an application that caused a lot of angst and anxiety in a rural neighborhood, and I'm just wondering where we're at with that and how the neighborhood is advised.
Okay, planner hopefully can answer that question.
The applicant was advised when they came in with the proposal about the cell tower, about the importance of talking with DND and getting their approval. The applicant then did submit and provided an approval from NAVCAN. And as part of our normal referral process, given it's that close to the base, we did refer it to the base. So what we did find out then was NAVCAN is separate. I guess they didn't know this from the base. NAVCAN looks at conflict with communications devices, and they had advised there be no conflict with communication devices. The actual height limit and impact on the approaches is something that DND looks at. They've asked for some more time as they run. I think they've got a new GIS model because their approaches actually angle in. So they're not constant over a lot. They come in at an angle, and then they also angle on their sides. So they're running that, and we're waiting a response from them. Once the application, prior to the application coming to council for issuance, consideration of issuance, we will notify property owners and tenants within a 75-meter radius of the property.
So the residential area hasn't been notified of this.
There's no residential.
No, this is directly, almost just, it's on the corner, when you're looking at the corner of the CVAC, just a little bit east on the south side of Knight Road. There's a large parcel. So when we do the notification within 75 meters, we'll pick up probably the 1 agricultural lot to the east, 1 large parcel to the south, and DND, CVAC, and maybe 1 or 2 other parcels. That's it. Just because the size of those parcels are extremely large.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions?
I have
Councillor
a couple
Swift?
of questions. On that page 7, in the subdivisions that are ongoing, I just kind of noted how long some of them have been open and ongoing. I'm just wondering if you can speak to those larger subdivisions and just give me some information on what's happening with those. Are they proceeding or?
Yes. So the two in question I assume that we're looking at are SD 1102 and 1101,
Yes.
33 and 99 lots.
Mhm.
Actually, those two plus the military row are all in the same situation. So the applications were submitted. Of concern was Queen's Ditch. What's happening is those properties are all draining to the east. So it's going to go into Queen's Ditch, and it's going to go into the agricultural lands, and we also have Hilton Springs and Lazo Marsh in terms of that downslope area. So we're working with the applicants. We've now got a tentative terms of reference for a study to do a stormwater impact, to look at those factors, i.e. Queen's Ditch capacity, because it has had a history of flooding, and there has been a lawsuit with a settlement out of court. Impact on the agricultural lands and impact on the Lazo Marsh. Also impact in Queen's Ditch, the lower reaches are fish bearing. So we do have that tentative on the terms of reference. We are just in sort of the final negotiations of that, and that will come forward to council so that you can see those terms of reference. Including in that would be a public consultation plan for meetings as they run through the engineering to ensure that it'll be a lot of groundwater recharge. We'll be involved in that, so there's no negative impact on those factors.
Thank you. Can I continue?
Yes, please.
Okay. The fact that it indicates we've got new, ongoing, and closed, the fact that we have files that are closed, that does not give us information regarding that, whether it's going proceeding or not. It's
No.
just closed. Okay.
Yes. And typically that means that they've been approved and there's construction. It's pretty rare for files for applicants not to proceed or for applications to expire. So that's quite rare.
And then my final question is on the page 8, under ongoing, Robert Gerard, the corner of Knoll and Torrance, to be rezoned to a new zone. Would that permit higher density?
It would permit, it would go from a minimum parcel size of 650 square meters to 450. So that'd be about, you're probably in the order of magnitude of a difference between 7 and 10 lots. It's relatively small, yes.
That was a concern of the neighbors.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
And that should be coming forward to council shortly.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any further? Seeing none, thank you for those questions and answers. We'll move on to staff reports. First, we have at page 13 the fourth quarter financial statement report for receipts.
Move receipt.
Second on receipt, all those in favor? Motion is carried. Any questions for our Director of Finance? No, sir, Matt.
Don, we had, in our water metering program for 2010, 2011, we had $1,450,000, and $450,000 of that was going to be funded by that money we're getting back from the regional district. And then in, I think the last report I noticed that you had in there under the water meters $650,000 because they gave us the rest of the money back, right? I'm just wondering where that other $200,000, where it went.
I'm not sure what.
Okay, well, we'd like to call it a grant from the regional district for water meters, when in fact it was our money they were giving back to us for water meters. They gave us $650,000 back, did they not?
I'm not sure about the exact number, but yeah, on that order of magnitude.
And we have $450,000 of that budgeted for water meters. What did we do with the other $200,000?
Well, at this point, what I've done is recognized all that as earned income. I've basically charged all of our metering expenses against it.
So then, if we were going to put money out of general revenue into that, Where did that money go? Now, does that show up in a surplus then, or what?
That'll show up as a water surplus, yeah. It wasn't coming out of general revenue, it was coming out of water fund general revenue.
Yeah.
So it was all from the water fund, yes.
So that means it's still in there.
It's still in there, and then the money that we budgeted for coming from the Community Works Fund, the federal
Yeah.
gas tax money, I did tap into a little of that, but not much.
So,
I can give you a breakdown at the next meeting
Thank
on
you.
the exact, because we still haven't finalized, I just made inventory adjustments yesterday, so I still haven't finalized the total cost of the metering project, but I can bring you those updates and let you know how I funded it.
Okay.
well, shouldn't it,
Are you referencing, just so we're all more or less on the same page here, page 19?
well, I can't find it in here.
The
so
water
I'm-
fund?
Yes. All I'm wondering about is that if council had agreed, not all of council agreed though, to spend $1,450,000, and it was broken down between gas tax money, the provincial, or the regional district grant, and money from general revenue. Where did the authority come from to take that $200,000, that extra that we got back from the regional district, and use that to fund that $1,450,000, is all I'm asking. Is that if
I
that
guess-
money came back, that should have been at council's discretion and not staff's discretion, wouldn't it? Because that was the funding that we approved.
It was conditional by the regional district and intended to be spent on metering, right?
On
It's
metering
identified
and
as water
education.
efficiency.
On water efficiency, but
So when the regional district asked us, what are you going to do with this money? We said from the outset that we'll spend it on metering. But I'll bring a report back to the next committee meeting.
Okay.
thank
Give you a
you.
breakdown of how we funded.
Thank you. I think Councillor Price, you're next.
Yes, I just had a couple of questions. I notice on page 20 in the reserve fund balances that the budget that is committed by the financial plan is it's over half the total reserve fund balance, 6 million and a bit. Is it normal to take that much out of reserves? And how will we get the reserves back?
I guess the answer is it varies depending on the nature of the projects and the timing of the projects. For instance, development cost charges are levied on the basis of a specific list of projects over a 10-year period. And if you're in and depending on what's in this coming 5-year period, you may either use a lot of those DCCs or not all of them. In fact, in the road DCCs, you can see that we've committed more funds. We're assuming that we'll get additional road DCCs to give us enough money to build some of our projects, right? Because we've assumed all 3 phases of the Guthrie second lift, all the way over to, what's the name of the pest? To Lynchart, yeah. And so in fact, we may not have, depending on the timing of that, we may not, and when DCCs come in, we may or may not actually have 1.265 million in road DCCs.
So we wait on the project? Or?
Well, I don't think so. That's at council's discretion, but that project is overdue. Certainly, the first phase that we did, the road was beginning to deteriorate.
Well, we'll be discussing that as part of the capital plan as we go forward here.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
And I just noticed in the remaining, there's 1 or 2 items on page 19. Things like walkway around the marina, 15,000, the Bay Park plan, near 15, and the waterfront walkways, 15,000. Have these been spent yet, or will they get
No.
spent?
I don't believe they've been spent at all, other than, looks like $34.
Glenn?
Sorry, if I may. I just know from in discussions with Al Fraser that the urban forestry plan is underway.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
And it's not 25,000.
No, it was 14. 14. Yes, thank you. 14, correct.
So we, when we do our 2012 financial plan, we can discuss
Oh, yeah.
these monies that are left over.
Yeah, this is, remember, a year-end report.
Yeah.
Things have happened since then, but nothing has happened on the Bay Park plan, waterfront walkway, or walkway around here, to my knowledge.
So we would decide whether to spend the
Yes.
remaining funds budget.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, anything further? Seeing none, we'll move on to page 23, 2012 marina rates and revenue potential. A motion to receive a report from our director of finance, please.
So
On receipt, all those in favor? Motion is carried, and we can have some discussion and questions. Councilor Tom.
Well, just based, I know we haven't finished our strategic plan yet, but just based on, some of the initial discussions we had with priorities and that, and the fact that I don't think that we should be so far under a private enterprise that I'm going to recommend that we go with that increase of 6, 12, and 6 that John has got in his report.
Okay, so your motion is to increase marina rates by 6% in 2012, 12% in 2013, and 6% in 2014?
Yeah, and I know that that's 12% in 2013 sounds like a lot, but when they reduce the HST, as Don has pointed out in his report, then that's going to mitigate that increase.
Okay.
Was that a motion?
That's what I was just going to ask, and is there a second?
I'll second it, sure.
And discussion on the motion. Councilor Price.
I just had a question around, are the facilities comparable, the municipal and the private facilities?
I'm biased. I don't think they are comparable. I think ours is better.
I think a lot of people might agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Although ours doesn't have the longer slips that are capable of taking larger vessels, right? So if you're in the smaller boat category, particularly sailboats, ours is better suited.
Okay. Other questions, comments?
And just,
Councillor
and-
Swift, yes?
And how many slips do we have?
Roughly, I think 180-ish. Richard, is that right?
I think we use 150 as the guiding, 150 to 160.
Okay.
Just before Councillor Pengrant, is it customary to do 3 years, or do we do it a year at a time? That was the only question.
We have been doing it a year at a time, but there's nothing that stops us from putting a table into the bylaw
Okay.
that has rates for 3 years.
No, I'm okay with that. I just wanted
In
to-
fact, if the motion is for 3 years, I'd be fine with putting those in.
Okay. Councillor Kent.
Okay, sure. My only question was regarding the private marina over there. Historically, have they been raising their rates by 3% a year, I think your report says, and is there some indication that that's going to continue? What I don't want to be is, we do this and then we find out we're still behind, right?
We can review it.
Or maybe that's
We
fine. I
can
don't know.
review it
Yes.
anytime we want.
Just,
We can review it next year.
it's not like we don't want to be way above either, right? So,
It can be reviewed yearly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you'd have to amend the bylaw, but yes. Councillor Price.
I had a question which is slightly off the motion. Shall I raise it now, or?
If you're speaking to the motion, it would be appropriate, but if it's
It's
something
about the
different,
marina.
something different than the actual rates,
Yes.
okay, maybe we can deal with the motion here, and then you can certainly ask your question or make another motion. Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. So that will come back to us as a bylaw for next week.
Next week, yes.
Okay. And it would be what? Sorry?
Is there
2 weeks, sorry. I had myself leave here and all that. And that'll be first, second, and third reading, and then we wait another meeting to do adoption. Okay. Councilor Price.
Yes, and it was just a more general question on the marina. I certainly heard when I was door knocking that there was some concern in the community about actually getting spaces down in any marina actually down there, and people who come here for the lifestyle of live in town, walk to your boat, were very disappointed to find they found that it was 6-7 year wait list. is that the case, and that takes that long to actually get a berth, and do people put their names down and just wait for someone to die, or?
I don't know if the CAO. I think our CAO can address that.
Again, I think it's dependent on the length of slip you're looking for. Definitely in the, let's say, the 34-foot to 40-foot dimension, we are very limited, and there's a high demand and a long wait list for those spaces. As you get shorter, there's greater amount of turnover in those spaces, so there still is definitely more demand than supply in our whole area for marina berthage. But in terms of our facility, there is there's more of a turnover in the smaller spaces.
I understand from our marina caretaker who liaises with the Comox Bay Marina caretaker that it's fairly normal for people to put themselves on both lists in the hope that they'll get on. So the waiting lists, I understand, are fairly comparable. And yes, it's a multi-year process. We'll typically have 3 or 4 slips a year turnover.
Another factor to consider is that, generally speaking, in both the private marina and our marina, that when you go to sell your boat, if that's what you're doing, then you generally sell the slip with it, although it's really for the boat, and so that kind of impacts the waiting list as well. But we found in the past that if we didn't follow what the private marina did, there was a lot of people playing games with that.
Creative ownership. Yes.
Creative ownership. Sublets and partial agreements and partnerships and whatnot. So it does make for a long waiting list. Hopefully over time people will have the opportunities, and maybe there'll be some marina expansion. Certainly in the private marina they've talked about that. We're of course constrained by our footprint where we could go.
So have we looked at all at reconfiguration? Is there any opportunities to
within our marina?
increase? Yeah, in our marina, are we pretty much at capacity?
We're at capacity for the most part. There's some seasonal vacancies that exist where people that have the slip will pull their boat out for the winter, but the slip itself is still paid for the whole year. So other than a few small spaces in the, say, 18 to 20 foot range, we've got as many as we can put in there.
Councillor Grant.
If somebody has a slip down in our marina and they're going to go up to Desolation Sound for 3 months, do we sublease out that space?
We can, yes.
And so do we have to set rates for that? Or?
The rates exist in the bylaw right now. And there's usually an arrangement that if the holder of that berth signs up with us, we will do a revenue sharing program with them. So a 50-50 share with the person that holds the berth. So if they're going to be away for 2 weeks and we rent that slip out, we'll share the rent.
Okay. Is that utilized a lot?
More and more, it's as it gets a little better known, it is being taken advantage of.
Well, what are we doing to get the word out that we do that?
And it's usually through the caretaker. When the caretaker finds out that somebody is going to be away for an extended period of time, then we encourage them to put it out there.
Also used those spaces from time to time for transient visiting boaters. Now we have, of course, the Harbour Authority that's put in 900 feet of visiting boater moorage, so dockage, I should say. So that hopefully will help in that regard, bring more visitors here. All right, anything further on marina? We'll carry it forward then to the council meeting on March 7th for the readings of the bylaw. All right, page 25. We're going to get a discussion on utility rates for water, sewer, and garbage. And initially, I guess, a motion to receive the report, and we can deal with bylaws.
I'll move receipt.
Second.
A receipt then, all those in favor? Motion's carried. And of course, this is our Director of Finance, and I know he's been working hard to put this together, and really this is the beginning of our budget process for all intents and purposes. And the report is relatively self-explanatory, but certainly if there's questions or comments from members of council, you can address those. And Director of Finance, do you have anything to add this time? Okay, Councillor Price and Councillor Grant.
And thank you for both for this report and then the report on water. It was a lot of information, so I read it 3 times and yellowed all over it, and I'm still. But I just wondered, one of the points on the bottom of page 26, it says that on average commercial customers pay less per cubic meter than do residential customers, 78 cents to $1. I just wondered, why we would do that with the fact that it costs, we buy the water at a bulk rate and it costs the same whatever it's being used for. I guess it's historic. And even reading the second report and looking at the increase, a potential increase in the commercial rate, it didn't bring them to the same level. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
I guess, Your Worship, I brought forward in November of 2009 a report that recommended we bump the metered rate to 99 cents, brought forward a bylaw which Council didn't consider. And so what I'm looking for this time is a compromise, because Council was clearly not happy with the 99 cents rate in 2009. I think we ultimately do need to continue to work it out. But clearly, a gradual approach will be much more acceptable for the users.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Councillor Price?
I think so. I mean, just assuming it's historic, though, why commercial people would pay less for water than residential. It's just how it grew up, is it?
About 7 years ago, we actually started to analyze the rates and what various classes were paying. And we were surprised to find at that point in time that our metered rate was lower than the bulk water rate. So we were losing money on every cubic meter we sold. And so I've been trying to step up that metered rate as a consequence. We have a very small number of metered customers at this point in time. We're talking less than 100, and they include commercial, industrial, and institutional. A lot of that is institutional. The hospital, the schools, those sorts of things. And so it's almost, I won't say it's insignificant, because it does add up. In terms of volumes, there's over 200,000 cubic meters of water they're using a year. But the vast majority of our customers and the vast majority of our revenue is the flat fee. And so I think that's where we've been paying attention all the years.
Okay. And edging that. I just have a couple of other, if I could. Under water fees, when you mentioned the water use has declined over the last 2 years, I just wondered, speculating whether that could also be due to education and people being more, using more water conservation, more voluntary water conservation. That's what jumped out at me. And that we'd hope that trend could continue. Anyway, just a speculation on
there
that.
has been education and awareness for sure, both the regional district and the town. We also had a person enforcing the restrictions as well, and that's been the last 2 summers, I believe, see you.
Yes.
So, anecdotally, I suppose that's the case.
Just one last one on the yard waste. I had a couple of stratas where I go up the game. People were saying that there were some people who would actually like yard waste pickup. Some of our stratas, as you know, people have their own private backyard. It's a strata development, townhouses, that they have their own private backyard, and they're kind of frustrated that there isn't any means to put it out. Is the strata council asked, because obviously it would be a group decision. I wondered how do we just automatically say there's no yard waste pickup for stratas, or have they had a choice and turned it down?
When the yard waste service was introduced, it was actually brought to us by Emterra, and they came to us and offered the service on the basis that it would be provided to single-family homes and duplexes. And the Harborwood complex approached us and said, well, we'd rather you didn't include us. There's roughly 50 duplexes there. And so basically the program was brought to us, and so our bylaw always contemplated just doing single-family homes and duplexes, excluding Harborwood. I guess the tricky part is that I suspect that most, while we have heard from several stratas that would like the service, we suspect that most of them probably wouldn't want to pay the full cost, because at $40 a unit, or or thereabouts, it's fairly expensive service, and they're probably not producing as much yard waste as single-family homes are, relatively speaking, per unit.
But it is something we could look at some point.
Thank you.
All right, I had Councillor King and Councillor Tom.
Oh, I thought Tom was before.
Tom and Ken, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
A couple things. First of all, can you explain to me what a roll-off compactor load is when you're referring to?
Yeah. We have 3 customers, the hospital, Extra Foods, and Quality Foods. And their garbage goes into a great big metal bin, and it's actually picked up by a semi-trailer truck and hauled up to the dump. And so it's a big steel box.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. And you want us to make a recommendation to take your water fees along with garbage and sewer, the first, second, and third reading, and yet we're dealing with water and overall meter rate for water use later on. I'm just wondering why we would make a recommendation and then later on in this meeting talk about the metered water rates.
Well, ideally, I would like to have a bylaw in place the 1st of March so that we can get on with, or the 1st of April, so adopted by before the end of March, so we can have the next quarter of utility billings at the new rates. So that would be the ideal from my point of view. And as for the second memo, yes, there are some proposed alterations there, and regardless of what the committee does with that, I would hope that we could proceed with the changes to the sewer and the garbage rates.
Well, I'm quite prepared to make the first 2 recommendations, but the third one on water, water's the second one, the first and third. But if we're going to talk about water later,
Well, we can basically deal with them as a package, separately, refuse, sewer, and then the water. We can, at this point, if the committee passed the water recommendation, it would go to council meeting on March 7th. And of course, before then, later today, we'll have the discussion on the other aspect of it. So I guess they're separated because there's sort of 2 separate issues here. One is what should our flat rate be, and then what should our meter rate be. But if we'll see where we get to today, really. And I think that's up for discussion today as to how we want to proceed. We can also, if you wish, table or defer the water rates issue till after we've had our discussion later today.
yes, I would prefer
We
that.
can deal with it any number of ways. Either or is fine with me. How does council wish to proceed? Are there more questions? I know Ken, you had your hand up. So.
Well, I had the same comment that Tom just made actually on that it seemed funny to pass the thing and then set the rate later. It seemed like that was backwards too, so that was part of what I was going to say. And the other one was, when I read this report and it said that you attribute this mostly to weather, I had the exact same comment as Councillor Price, which was, so there's no credit for education and enforcement and all the things. So I looked on the Environment Canada website, and in fact, in 2011, the precipitation was less than in 2010. And it was less by almost 21%. And if you looked at May, June, July, and August, it was also almost 21 or 22% less than in 2010. So I would have to say that the education and enforcement played a major role in what happened, rather than the weather. That would indicate that in fact is not the case at all. It had to be from the education and enforcement part. And I think people are much more aware of water use than they were several years ago. So I think that is having the big impact that we're seeing the changes. So for what it's worth.
Yeah, and you know, I know that last August, when it was really hot and dry, then the water use went up exponentially. So, I mean, it depends what time of year it is too. So there's, all these things are helping, and you know, weather is a factor. I'm sure education is a factor as well. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. Very extensive memo, and I'm just wondering if perhaps we could just focus on the garbage and then talk water and then talk sewer, because we keep flipping back and forth there. So
These were general questions. If we want to get to specific motions on specific...
I would make a motion that we send bylaw 17, 14 for first, second, and third.
And that's for the refuse.
That's for the refuse.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Discussion on the garbage. Councillor Fletcher, you have it.
Thank you. Just to further reflect on what is said in this memo is that the regional district tipping fees are, they certainly have increased this year to 80, and they will go up $10 more each year. And I truly believe that's a reflection of that the system was getting behind the times, and it's time to catch up. And I can assure you that other facilities on the island are well above us. From a high of $135 a ton in the Cowichan Valley, where they have to export their garbage down to the States, you know, to 107 in Victoria, 107 in Nanaimo. So garbage is a very expensive business, and we're having more and more regulations. We're having landfills that have to close, they have to be addressed. So to think that landfill fees and tipping fees aren't going up, they have to go up, and I think we have to play catch up with what's going on right now. So I certainly support the increase that is here, and regrettably.
I regrettably support it.
Okay, Councillor Grant.
Oh, no, I was jumping the gun.
Okay. All right, any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Would somebody care to move the sewer one?
Okay, I'll move bylaws 17, 16 for first, second, and third reading.
For the sewer rates?
Yep.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on sewer? Councillor Price.
I just had, I wasn't quite clear on page 35, at the number 2 under the Schedule A. That's all apart, isn't it? That was good.
Yes.
So number 2 speaks to those who are built the town water service on a metered basis it will be assumed that the same amount will go into the sewer. Does that just apply to commercial, or if somebody, a homeowner who has a meter, decides that they want to pay the metered rate, would that number 2 kick in for them? Because that would seem to be, it wouldn't work for a residential, I wouldn't have thought, because what you bring into the house, a lot of it in the summer will go in the garden, it won't automatically, what comes in will go out. So I wasn't quite clear on that, what that applies to.
Correct. Yeah, at this point, what we're looking at with that provision is the industrial, commercial, and institutional customers. And what tends to happen with them is that what they use in water goes back into the sewer system. And we know that the regional district's charging us more for sewage than they are per cubic meter for supplying bulk water. So it's more expensive to treat sewage than to buy the water. So a 1-to-1 ratio at a minimum strikes us as a reasonable provision. Now that kind of falls away when you're looking at the typical single-family home, because when you're looking at residential customers, particularly single-family homes, duplexes, they tend to use more water outside the home, particularly in the summertime, When you look at the fact that our water use almost triples in the summer, it's clear that it's not because of what's going on inside the homes, it's because of where the water is being applied outside.
Should we spell that out in two? Because when I read it, it would seem that it would apply to if you switch to the metered rate for the house, then following that, wouldn't that automatically?
If we adopt metered residential rates, then the answer is yes. We'll have to incorporate that provision.
Okay. But this is okay as it stands at the moment?
At this point in time, we have no metered residential customers.
Okay.
Okay. Anything further on the sewer rates? Councillor Fletcher.
Just a bit concerned on the flat rate that we're taking it down and we're increasing the water, and as we look on page 28, we've done some fluctuations, so to speak, over the years with those partial taxes. We certainly do have a capital reserve of $2 million in sewer, but I just think we're going to have extensive costs with sewer too, and I'm just wondering if staff could further comment about the decision to shift those two.
We haven't made a decision to shift. The parcel taxes for 2012 will be the same as 2011.
But you were preferencing in 2013?
I'm saying that by next year I'll be able to report to you more fully on this, and we'll probably make a recommendation that we balance off those two, so that instead of charging 30 and 60, we would charge 45 and 45.
Okay, so for 2012, we're keeping them flat, basically. That is the recommendation. Okay, so any further discussion on the sewer rates? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Now, for the water rates, we could vary the agenda to bring forward the discussion on the meter rate, and then see where we get to. That is starting at page 63.
I would refer the bylaw 1715 to the later discussion.
Okay, what I was suggesting is we could bring that later discussion to now. While we're talking about it, is that okay?
Yeah.
Sort of vary the agenda, so moving that report, starting at page 63.
Okay.
So a motion to receive that report at this time would be in order.
So moved.
Second?
On receipt then, all those in favor? Motion's carried. So we're bringing that report forward to be discussed at this time, and discussion can ensue. Are there questions for our Director of Finance or other comments that people wish to make? Go ahead, Councillor Tomcat.
I have got some real concerns about this, because if you look at a matter of fairness and equity and everything else, I mean, I think that we started out on this path of water meters with bad information, and, you know, we went on the premise that, you know, Comox was using way too much water, and if you look at what our population is, the latest statistics of 13,627, I've worked it out, and I think we're using about 375 liters per person per day. And I mean, if you look at the billboard that the regional district has up on ice rink number 1 at the rec center, it says that the average person on a water meter uses 490 liters per person per day, and without a water meter it's like 640. Well, we're way under that, you know, and so here we are, because we've got some people on water meters and some people who aren't on water meters, and we're trying to figure out an equitable rate. And I can tell you, we're going to find ourselves with a whole bunch of egg on our face if we start following this and start raising rates, or raising these rates, and thinking that you know, that if we charge 88 cents that we're going to conserve water or force the people to save money. I worked out some math here on the average. You know, I think Don said earlier that we, in the town of Comox, based on the information we've got from the water meters, we're using about 300 cubic meters per household, right? per year?
On the metered, single-family homes,
Yeah.
the readings to date are actually under that.
Under that?
Yeah.
Right, so I think it's about 292 actually.
Yeah.
But I use 300 just as an example. And can I use the board?
Certainly.
This pen,
There's
yeah.
no pen, but you
You need a whiteboard then?
spell his name.
So this is based on 300 meters, cubic meters per year, and this is an average household. And we know that in January, February, March, April, and I'm going to say May even low, and then June 40, July 50, August 60, September, actually, if I could read, 40, and then back down to 15, 15, and 15. These are cubic meters. Now, Don, you've seen the meter rates. I mean, this will fairly well represent where it goes, right? You know, we're real high in July and August, June, July, and August, and September, and then it falls back down, right?
Yeah, September actually tends to be a little lower than that, but that's...
Okay, well then
that's
May's
nitpicky.
probably a little higher.
Yeah, yeah, I mean,
So it's,
but that's the general trend.
so this adds up to 300, trust me. I've done the math. So, and Don's suggesting that anything over 15 cubic meters, 12 cubic meters a month, we're going to pay 88 cents. So if you just take, do the math here, anyway, trust me that it adds up to 156 cubic meters that this guy, who's not a water hog, he's using 300 cubic meters a year, and that's way under the national average, and it's under the BC average. He's got 156 cubic meters that he's going to be paying 88 cents for, right? Plus he's going to be paying $240 a year flat rate. Well, this guy just spent $137.28 here for a grand total of $377.28. We told him if he takes a water meter, he's going to save money. He's paying $377, and the water pig down the street who's got a great big 5-bedroom house with a swimming pool is going to be paying $321 a year. This is what's going to happen to us if we start playing with these numbers, and so if we want to make this more equitable, you either got to drop this way down or you got to raise this way up. Well, if we don't have any more money in our budget to give everybody a water meter, we've got to forget about this whole thing. And if we just raise the flat rate up to $321, we've got enough money to cover everything that's happening. But when we start pissing off our citizens because we haven't really figured out what we're doing, for this poor guy to get down even to the flat rate that that the other people in town are going to do, this guy's going to have to just let his lawn go brown in the summers. This is a very complicated situation, and we've got to put a heck of a lot more thought into it. And we also, so if we want to start, we either reduce this or we raise this. And don't forget, if we raise this up to 88 cents, our biggest users, metered users, the guys who are really going to get hurt on this are the hospital and the school board, and they're already challenged with their budgets. So,
two questions for you.
okay.
One is, that is based on a median, let's say, or an average.
Based on the average.
Average. So, I mean, there is still opportunities for people who don't use the average to save money if they're not up to 50, 50, 40, 40, and so on.
Well,
So that would be...
You can play with these numbers all you want, but for the guy on a water meter to get down to $321, these numbers here aren't killing him. There's only, I think if you add that up, there's about 24 meters of water that he has to buy at 88 cents. Well, that's not going to on top of that $240. It's when you start getting into the 28 and the 38 meters that he has to, cubic meters that he has to buy in the summertime,
Which is principally outdoor water use,
which is outdoor water use.
or pools or whatnot, yeah.
But we told him when you got a voluntary water meter system, there's an opportunity
There
to
is an
save money.
opportunity, yes.
The only opportunity he has to save money here is to let his lawn go brown. That's the only way he's going
Or
to
to
do it.
use alternatives to landscaping that don't require as much water, things like that.
Well, the guy's house is already landscaped, All I'm talking about is fairness and equity.
Yeah.
And you got to understand that this guy, he's only using 300 cubic meters a year. And 300 cubic meters, and we got an average of 2.19 people per household. You do the math on that, and I can tell you that this household with 2.19 people in it are using 375 liters per person per day. 375. The regional district are trying to get it down to 490 on meters. Right? What the heck is going on? Town of Comox, we are not using a lot of water. We're not using too much water.
I guess the other question is, and certainly highlighted in the earlier report, is that our cost of water is about $1 a cubic meter.
Our cost?
Our cost.
To 62 cents.
To recover our cost, our true cost, and I think that's why we addressed that issue back in December '09, was that our cost, our true cost, is really closer to $1. And I don't know whether the Director of Finance wants to refresh our memory on that, but I know that the bulk rate is 62 cents, but our cost is closer to $1. So
what cost do we have over and above the bill?
that's where our Director of Finance can refer back to that.
If you turn to page 39 of the agenda, you'll see that the total operating expenditures for 2012, the total operating expenses are $2,229,000. Now you can back out of that $225,000 of contributions to capital reserves and $39,000 worth of debt interest and principal that's related to the specific local services, right? So then what you can do is there's about $2 million worth of costs. And we're budgeting bulk water purchases about $2.45 million. You have to factor into that we've got unaccounted for use, right? There's water losses and use that we can't identify. So what we're actually delivering to customers, we think, is somewhere on the order of 2 to 2.1, 2.2 million. And so if you want to determine what the overall cost of our operations are per cubic meter delivered, you just divide the total operating cost by the amount of water you think you're delivering. The other point I'd make is that, yes, our average residential use based on the flows we've got was in the 290s, but the median use is about 60 cubic meters less than that. And that's important because the median user is the one, if you stratify a list of all your users and how much they use, the median user is halfway down. So that means half of our customers on single-family homes are probably using less than 240 cubes a year. And we have about 1,000 strata customers that are probably using about half, roughly speaking, of what single-family homes are using. I agree that at the rates I've suggested, and particularly with that $20 flat rate per month, that's a fairly high minimum standard, and that it's very hard for someone who's using the average amount of water. They're never going to want to switch to payment by the cubic meter.
And of course, that is, the challenge that council has here is to, first of all, set a flat rate. And then to consider as well, if we want to consider setting a metered rate, that people would have the option to convert to. And that is the essence of the program, and we've installed the meters, and then people have the option this year or next year or subsequent years to decide whether or not to do it. I know that in other jurisdictions, they do have flat rates, and they do have metered rates, some even have stepped rates. And this is an attempt at this point to look at this and to set a plan going forward. And, you know, I take the point that we have to be very careful, and we have to do this in a way that makes sense for people and gives them, I think Councillor McKinnon put this a few meetings ago about making it very easy to understand to a layperson. I think that's where we need to get to if we can, both on the flat rate as well as the meter rate. And I guess the point I would like to make is that on the flat rate, we have to look at recovering costs, regardless of what we want to do with meters. And I guess the point about the flat rate is, you know, based on the initial report, is that we have to decide, you know, you've recommended a $12 increase from the current 303, so that's one aspect of it. And maybe that's appropriate, maybe it isn't, and then setting a metered rate that reflects that. Ken and then Tom.
So question, if you were saying that the essence of the program is that people will see that they can save money on the meter or however that was, and then they'll switch over. But we haven't budgeted for any more meters than the phase that we've done. So what are we going to do? Let's say 1,000 people want to switch over next year. Are we going to give them a meter? Are we going to charge them for a meter? We don't know.
The only option is for people to switch over at this point for those that have meters.
So we haven't. So we would have to then budget for or charge for a meter if you wanted one beyond that. Is that correct?
Council will have to turn its mind as to whether, I don't think there's any more funds in the budget for additional meters. The voluntary program was available to those houses that were meter ready and those that volunteered. I think we had 70 or so that volunteered, and we had the rest of town basically, the houses that were built in the last number of years. So that program, if it's passed by council, would be only available to those who currently have meters, unless and until council decided to budget for further meters. Tom, and then Barbara.
Okay, if the average person in the town of Comox is using 292 cubic meters per year, the average person, we can charge them $1 a cubic meter, and we can actually reduce our flat rate. We don't have to increase it from $303. We could reduce it down by $11. But the problem is that there's those people that are using more water. So, you know, we've embarked on a program where we spend all this money on water meters, and you know, I tried to point it out last year that I didn't think we were water pigs. That we have some people who are using an inordinate amount of water in the summertime. And I think you can put 3 people on bicycles and go out on the street and police it. And, you know, I talked to Ed Houlihan, who was the water cop in the Comox Valley last year, and I asked Ed about, you know, the people that he's finding who are watering at the wrong time and everything. And for the most part, and I can find this entirely believable, they are older people, they're an older demographic who don't know how to reprogram their sprinkler system from 3 times a week to twice a week. And we could embark on a program. I agree we can raise our flat rate to everybody up to $321. Nobody gets the metered rate. And let's go out there and stop those people who are using too much water. And, you know, we're going to employ people. We're going to solve our water problem. We're going to try and get these numbers down in the summertime. Because, you know, October, November, December, January, February, and March, we can supply those people with that water till kingdom come with the system we've got. And we've got a problem in June, July, and August. Well, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. They're watering lawns. And if somebody's using too much water watering a lawn, let's educate them, let's knock on the door, let's reprogram their system for them, and at least try that for a year. But I'm not, this program that we're embarking upon, boy oh boy, I just showed you where this guy here with 300 cubic meters is going to be paying $1 something a cubic meter for it, when our metered rate is 88 cents. you know, we can't penalize those people that voluntarily got a water meter, because they didn't ask for it. They voluntarily got it, and now we're in a pickle. Because if we try and solve this problem with this math, it's not going to work, because we know where the problem is. Let's solve the problem and quit trying to do all this high math with this. Let's stick with a flat rate to everybody and use some. We've got money for education back from the regional district. We can embark on a 3-year education program and see if this works, and if it doesn't, well, people don't have to vote me in. There's going to be an election in 3 years.
All right. Councillor Briggs. Councillor Briggs.
My understanding is that it is voluntary for people to choose the metered rate or not. So I don't think any of this is going to be imposed on people. I think if it was going to be imposed on people, I think director grants fears would be realised, and I did the maths too. And for the average metered water use, it is more expensive to actually use your meter going on the average usage that we've been able to document. And I think you have to remember too that these are statistics of people who've got meters, not statistics for the whole of the town. So in a way, it almost is a non-issue, I think, because there will be some people who choose the metered rate. I think it'll be small, and I think that our Director of Finances is probably going to be glad that it's small, because, as he pointed out, there's that balance. We have to recoup the cost of buying the water and also the pipes in the ground. It's not just the cost of bulk water. And I accept that your calculations that it's looking at $1 a cubic meter to buy it and have the pipes and get it to people. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of people switching over. I think if we saw a huge amount of people switching over, then we may get into a tricky situation where we're not bringing in the amount that we need to run the system. So, I hear what Director Grant is saying, and I do think at this point in time we're not going to see a lot of people switching because they're going to do the math themselves. But we definitely have to set a metered rate, and there will be people who will use it, and there are people who use an incredibly small amount of water. They don't water outside, and they have low usage in the house. So for them, it will be the blessing that they came for. So I certainly could see that the one that made the most sense was the one recommended by our Director of Finances. I think the other message that it will put over too is that the bulk rate that the commercial people are paying, and there will be concerns of it going from 78 cents to 88 cents. I think that they will realize that they're still getting a really good deal, because that 88 cents is below the cost of actually providing it. So I think that all this coming in together, I think will give them that assurance that no one likes to see rates going up, but that it's fair and that they're still under what the residences are paying. But I don't think many people are going to take these rates up, to be honest. But we certainly have to have one in place, and I think it'll be a slow process. And who knows what water prices will be in the future, and maybe more incentive in the future.
Councillor Grant.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying that, I thought, boy, anytime you increase something, I've never heard of anybody that thought it was good. But I guess you said, too, that you didn't see who was going to be hurt by this. Well, it'll be the hospitals, the schools, and the commercial users that are going to be hurt by increasing the rate by 10 cents. And it can be significant in some of those areas. So, that's another rationale that we have to look at when we're raising that rate. It may be okay for the residential guy, and perhaps you're right, perhaps you're wrong, I don't know, but I know when you get into industrial and commercial, that can be a big bite. And, we did talk a lot about revitalizing our downtown and trying to do it, and of course, increasing rates on them is hardly working in that vein. So
Yeah, I think the point that's being highlighted is there is a discrepancy between cost of what we're providing and who's paying it. I mean, essentially at this point with our flat rate system being at what it is, the residences essentially are subsidizing the businesses and commercial and institutional. And, I think we have to move forward on this. We know that there is significant regional infrastructure projects in the very near future and that they're going to be funded through water rate increases. So we have to make sure we stay as much ahead of that as we can, or with that in mind. I certainly would support an increase to the flat rate, and it's going to be up to the will of council as to whether they want to set a metered rate. I think it is appropriate, as Councillor Price indicated, to set one so that people can make their own decisions. And I, for one, would like to see people given that opportunity. We've invested some funds in our water infrastructure that I think should be at least looked at as a water efficiency, part of the water efficiency plan. It's three aspects of that, from my recollection: engineering, education, and enforcement. And I think we're active on all fronts. And the engineering aspect is in the ground for 1,300 homes. So we should at least give those people an opportunity, should they choose to make it. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. It almost takes you back where, long before I was on council, there was, I'm not the understanding that there was a subdivision process that required homes to be water meter ready. So, well before my time, someone was starting to say, we've got to start proceeding to water meters. So there were these subdivisions waiting to have water meters dropped in for many years. So we made another step forward. We put some water meters in where they were water meter ready. Some people have chosen to have the water meters. So I think we just have to continue to take these steps forward. And why? Because, water costs, I believe, are going to increase rapidly over the next coming years. We've got extensive costs, as just were stated, and these are being mandated by DEHA. We don't know. There could be millions of dollars in infrastructure. We want to make sure we build the right size of infrastructure. But I think it would be irresponsible if we didn't start moving forward and not be ready for the future and assist those citizens today, but in the future too. We can't just sit back and not raise tipping fees for many years and then suddenly have tipping fees come up, as we just saw it with garbage. One additional part I really liked about this was the leak adjustment consideration clause. I would really like to see that, because as stated in the report, somebody might be reluctant to switch if suddenly they had a massive leak and they were paying for that leakage. I think that should be reflected, so I thought that was a very fair and considerate. The other thing is, 60-70% of homes in Canada are water metered. This isn't something new, and surely we can find, I've looked on the Canadian Water and Wastewater Association, and they say it's a best practice to do a fixed and a variable rate together, which is what our Director of Finance has presented to us. So it looks like it's the right formula. Is it the right numbers? I'm not sure, but I think we have to continue to work forward on this. This is how we have to proceed.
Councillor Grant.
Yeah, so I think we all agree that there's infrastructure upgrades coming down the pipe that are going to have to be dealt with, and that we should be preparing for that. What I don't get is what that has to do whether we set a metered rate or not. I don't get that, right? If we need to put money aside, then we should get our flat rate proper and leave it there. I don't see, your argument was that we have to do this for future infrastructure and all the stuff that has to be done. What does having a metered rate have to do with any of that?
Councillor Fletcher.
Thanks. And I would just reply that as costs go up, it's the fairness principle. And is it fair that I pay for what I use, as opposed to my neighbor who may use half of what I use, or may use 5 times? It's the fairness principle. And with most utilities, as we see with hydro or gas, with most utilities, and water is another utility, you get to pay for what you use. And at some point, if that number just keeps going up and up, the fairness is just not there.
Of course, you can't have a fairness if you've only got a third of the homes on a meter. That's unfair in its own right. But also, if you put a flat rate in, then where does user pay fit into that? I mean, it fits to a small portion of it. So I just can't follow that argument at all. I mean, if you're talking about user pay, then surely everybody should be on the same playing field. And they're not. So I can't buy that argument, sorry.
Okay, well, Councillor Price, you're next.
Well, the truth of the matter is that a third of the homes in Comox at this moment have meters, and they were offered the ability to either go with the flat rate or use the meter. So I think given, that this situation exists, and given that whether people support it or not, it was ultimately a council decision that resulted in it, I really don't see that we have any option but to set a metered rate so that people who wish to move away from the fixed rate can actually go to the metered rate. That's what was offered to people. I wasn't on the council at the time, but that's my understanding of what was offered to people. So I don't see that we have any choice. And I think the combination of the fixed rate and the metered rate is important. And I think our Director of Finance has made some very good points in his report when he talked about if you just go with a metered rate, if the house is empty, you're actually going to get nothing. You want to have some, and if I've understood rightly, it was a heck of a lot of reading material, but that having that fixed component means that you've got some guaranteed income regardless of what's happening in the house. So it's a way of getting that balance. So I really don't see that we have a choice other than to set a metered rate.
Well, Councillor Ken and then Tom, and then if the other councillors haven't had a chance to speak, have anything to add, we can give them an opportunity.
Need help there?
So then we can maybe see where we get to after those speakers. So Councillor Ken first, and then Tom.
So I guess the problem that I have with that is that you're saying that we have this situation and people can decide, but only some of the people can decide because only some of the people got a meter. And we have no plan for the future meter. That's why I asked that question earlier. So when you start talking about we have to do it because we have no choice, I think we have a big choice. We can just have a flat rate and not go there. Because it's really not fair to only allow some people to have the opportunity for a choice. And this was the problem with phasing this program in the first place when we did it. And it was the argument I had the entire time, was that this is going to end up to not work at the end. So that's, to me, you're not being fair when you're only giving some of the people the opportunity.
I just would like to point out that other communities have gone through pilot programs, City of Kamloops, and they've made it work on an incremental basis. And, the communities have to deal with this as best they can. And that's what council aid is. So we have a choice to make now as to whether we want to implement it. And it's nothing new that other communities haven't tackled. Councillor Tom.
Through the chair to Dawn, in the water fund capital expenditures, you got other of $628,000.
Page you're on, Tom? Sorry.
Oh, sorry, page 30. Oh, page 39.
Yep.
And so that $628,000, that's water meters, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so if we wouldn't have gone on that water meter program, our total expenses would have been about $1.9 million, right? And you're saying you need $1 or 88 cents a cubic meter or $1 a cubic meter just to recover the money. That's because there's water meters that we spent $628,000 on. I mean, when you look at the water revenue, we had what? $2,900,000 or something in revenue? $2,700,000.
Director of Finance?
So, to kind of put it in simple terms, okay?
I need it in simple.
Please.
In 2011, our water rate for single-family homes was $303. And in the example you've laid out on the whiteboard, you said an average home not a typical home, but an average home, is using 300 cubic meters of water. Okay? Accepting that number, then they're paying a little over $1 a cubic meter.
Yes.
Okay? So when you're trying to figure out where that dollar comes from, that's a good example. Okay? So in terms of what they're paying, it's roughly $1 if they're using 300 cubic meters. I don't think that the typical house is using that much. I think they're using less. I think the typical strata, and we have over 1,000 of them, is using much less. So if you're looking at customer classes, the real cross-subsidization is coming from the multifamily customers to the other classes, particularly the industrial, commercial, institutional.
So,
You didn't answer my question.
yeah.
In terms of
One of the reasons our costs are up there is because we spent $628,000 last year on water meters. If we
Correct.
wouldn't have done that, our water rates wouldn't have to be at 88 cents.
But we also got, if you turn to page 37,
I know,
you'll
we
see
got
that
$900,000.
You'll see that we got $559,000 of money from Community Works. We got $100,000 from Community Works and $458,000 from the regional district. Right?
The regional district were merely giving us our money back. They charged us 12 cents a cubic meter more over a period of, 3 years? Paul, you were the chair of the water committee. They took 12 cents extra a year and then gave it back to us. That's not what I call a grant, because the regional district doesn't have a magic pot of money somewhere. They just gave us our money back.
It's all part of the water efficiency plan. Yeah.
Your Worship, I guess the point I'm making is that the vast majority of the $628,000 was not funded from operating expenses and water fees, right?
And when we last considered the cost of water and the metered rate, flat rate and the metered rate, we hadn't yet spent any money on the meters at that point. That was back in December '09. And, when I think about all the discussions over many years at the Regional District and the Water Committee, one that comes to mind is what Director Jim Gillis has said, and it's putting it all in perspective, is that for somewhere less than $1 a day, residents get to use good quality drinking water. And the challenge here is to make wise use of that resource. And, to highlight what Councillor Congrant has put on the board, it's to try to tackle some of the usage outside and to deal with fairness issues, to deal with equity issues, and to apply the three-pronged approach of engineering, enforcement, and education. And I think we've made some progress, and the numbers perhaps speak for themselves. I'd be interested to hear if any further discussion is coming from either Councillor Swift or McKinnon, who haven't had a chance to speak on this.
They're wisely,
You don't have
they're wisely remaining quiet.
It's really difficult to jump into this point. I mean, water meters is a huge issue, door to door, huge issue. Both sides, pro and against. I think those people that got meters would be more than a little surprised, even with their numbers that they've been given about their consumption, that they would be more than a little surprised to find that their number would be $3.77 as opposed to the bulk rate or the flat rate. And I don't think that would be their intent, that they'd put a meter in and be expecting to pay more than the average person. So I do believe that council at that time led them to believe that they would have the option. So I think in the interest of that indication that we need to set some kind of rate. I'm not sure what it is. The other piece of that is, I agree with what Councillor Ken Grant has said, in that it's not fair if we don't have some kind of program available for people that want to, at some point, come onto a metering program. Sure. So I think we are, it would be wise to set aside some money from somewhere to allow those people that want to get a meter to have that option. Whether they choose to or not, we would have to see. I mean, it really concerns me, because I think people will be really annoyed that they volunteered for a meter, and with the notion that they were going to be paying less, and here they are. And just as a personal aside, I know one strata group that I'm familiar with, they're saying, we don't want to do the metered rate because it's going to create all kinds, they're patio homes, it's going to create all kinds of dissension in the neighborhood when the fellow across from them is power washing their driveway and they only have the one rate. And, you know, meantime, the little lady is having one shower every 3 days. So, you know, they're really opposed to paying the metered rate and would prefer to stay on the flat rate. And I thought, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. I mean, that's some more input that I had never even considered. So, I don't know where to go.
Well, and one thing I'll just add is that people who have meters now can go online and see what their consumption has been over the last number of months. Readings have gone back to as early as May of last year, is that right?
Our first reading was in April, and so we have use calculated for each month thereafter.
So, and they can assess that, and if they want to wait for another year, they can assess it again. CAO, you had your hand up, and Councillor McKinnon, I'll give you an opportunity, and then Councillor Grant.
Just to clarify a point raised by Councillor Swift, from a staff perspective, when we're talking to people that do have the meters, they are encouraged to carefully review their water use that's been collected by meter to see if they would benefit. And we would do the same if a metered rate was set. We would ask them to look at what their usage pattern is to see if there would be a financial benefit. We don't want to get into any deception and say you would benefit, but based on a pattern of usage, there is a possibility for some people to save money. But we don't want them to jump in automatically thinking, yes, they're going to save starting today.
No, I understand that, but I think that why would you do the metered rate if it's going to cost you so much more? And then it looks like, well, now I've got the meter and it was a big waste of time and energy and money. So
It'll depend, and everyone will have to look at the issues, and whatever rate we end up with will have to make some sense, and we may have to adjust those rates on a going forward basis. And many communities have gone through this struggle. This is not new. I think the regional district, the areas that they've metered, areas A, B, and C, portions of, they're setting up a rate, a flat or base rate, and then an incremental, and other communities do a tiered rate. So there is an ongoing process here that we'll have to monitor. And again, it's always been my hope that people who are using less than the average would benefit. I've always said that. Now, how it all works out, we'll have to see. Councillor McKinnon, you have anything to add at this time?
Yeah, well, I mentioned a few meetings ago, and you alluded to it, is that the public, most people are lay people in regards to understanding these things. And Councillor Swift alluded to that as well. And is there a simple explanation? Probably not. One of the questions that is asked, or at least was asked during the election campaign, is the continued cost of put-in water meters versus the savings that can be had, such as discovering leaks. Is that going to be balanced, or is it going to weigh one way or the other? And that's speculation, really, whether or not which way it's going to sway. So that question it's not an easy, it's a complex answer to those types of questions, and I'd like to be able to give the citizens an easier black and white answer. If there's savings in using the water meters, and it's a user pay philosophy, that seems to make sense. But if it's not a savings, why are we using the funds and the money to continue to do them unless there's a payoff in discovering leaks and other things that comes with the use of water meters?
Councillor Grant.
Okay, so I just had a question, and I asked this I think last term, and I'd forgotten all about it, but Maureen reminded me of this when she said people are going to get mad if their metered rate is actually higher than what they thought. And my question was, if I sign up for a metered rate, can I go back the other way? Can I change my mind? Can I do it for 6 months and say, gee, I don't like that, go back?
Under the current program in which you're in, I think it's under FAQs in the section of the website, is that once you're on it, then you're on it. So you would have to make, and I think the CEO alluded to that, an educated decision going into it.
Okay.
Yes?
Further to that then, if I purchase a house that's on a meter, on a metered rate, would that stay with the house?
I believe it would. Am I correct in that regard?
That's the information we've been providing people, Your Worship.
Yeah. And, they would know going into it that it was metered, because when they purchase it, there'd be an adjustment based on a metered rate, as is done in many other communities. Yes?
In fact, the tax certificates now, if it has a meter, even though they're not paying a metered rate, the tax certificates now currently disclose that the property is metered.
So, we've been discussing utility rates for about an hour now. Bulk of which has been on water. So if we want to have further discussion, that's fine, but I guess to try to guide that discussion, we could consider a motion around flat rates and metered rates, either based on what the Director of Finance has recommended in the initial report, combined with the second report, or we can deal with them separately. Flat rate is definitely needed to be looked at, and the metered rate, of course, is part of the discussion. So I would certainly, at this time, entertain a motion so we can guide our discussions further. Councillor Fletcher.
Make a motion that bylaw 1715 be forwarded to council for first, second, and third. We're back on page 25, water rates.
Okay, and that's just to deal with the flat rate at this time?
Flat rate, yeah.
So just to be clear, that's increasing the flat rate to 315 from 303.
I'll second that.
So that's been moved and seconded. Discussion on that. Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion? Those opposed? One opposed? Motion's carried. Any subsequent motion to deal with the meter rate? And any further increase to the flat rate?
Keep waiting, but it's not enough.
Councillor Fletcher.
I'll make a motion that we refer the metered rate back to staff for consideration of other formulas, and also to consider the leak adjustment clause.
Okay.
How's that?
I'll second
Sounds
that.
generally, yes, go ahead. It's been moved and seconded. And CAO had his hand up there.
Just for clarification, consideration of other formulas, are you looking for something with a lower rate, higher rate, or just a different distribution of how the rate would be collected?
Personally, I liked the formula where there was the flat rate and the variable, but there seems to be some concern at the table here on the numbers. So maybe some numbers can be readjusted and presented with different concepts. Maybe that would give maybe more comfort.
And I mentioned other communities have looked at stepped rates as well.
And, sorry, just for further clarification on the leak adjustment,
And just to, that it wasn't in that recommendation, but it was commented that some form,
just to include it in,
yeah,
okay.
and how their savings would be if there was a leak, how that would be accounted for.
Thank you.
Okay, so we got that motion to refer back to staff on meter rate different formulas and to include the leak adjustment clause. Been seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? 2 opposed. Motion's carried, so that'll come back to us. For further discussion, thank you for your careful consideration of all those matters. All right, moving on to CETA, the Canadian-European Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement. We do have a report here from our CAO, and also before you on the table is an update today that we received from UBCM.
So I would move the recommendation that we receive and file the information.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and that would include the UBCM memo?
Sure.
Thank you. Any further discussion on CETA and the information? Yes, Councilor Fletcher.
And we were going to refer this to the regional district as well.
Already before the regional district.
No, it came before the regional district, and we offered our report to them, so that when our staff report was ready, we would forward it to them.
Oh, okay, sure.
So that they didn't have to do a report as well.
Oh, okay.
Is that a?
I think that pays for it.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a direction to staff. that we
Okay,
can just
we'll send it with the correspondence.
Two cents a page for the paper. Oh, we're sending it
I'll carry
electronically,
it.
sorry.
All those in favor? Motion's carried. Destair House request for a handicap parking at page 45. And that is in regards to a letter we received. You can see that on page 46. And background information from staff, specifically for the information, so motion to receive.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded. All those in favor of receipts, and no discussion? Motion's carried. Councillor Tom, I know you are a rep at UBCM, so
I went out there and looked, and I think that there's a way, like, to the right of the sidewalk, there's a handicap parking stall, and then in front of that, there's another parking stall. I think if we were to, and I don't know if the numbers will work or not, but if we move that first non-handicap stall, if we push that forward about 6 feet, and then move the handicap parking up another 6 feet, I think there's probably room behind that for another handicap parking stall. And we've got the bus stop out there, that's for the HandyDart bus, right? So it's not, is it a city bus that stops?
No. There's no loading or there's two handicap spots. The initial gap from the crosswalk to the first is the 6-meter clearance for crosswalk. After that, there is a parking spot, but you start to get limited in space because there's a driveway. So, I mean, we could look at.
I was just wondering if there was a way to squeeze another one in there.
We could put any number that you want in there that is,
I'm talking about without losing street parking for regular.
At this point, every inch of parking space that we can utilize on that street is currently being utilized. So it's a matter of a trade-off. Do we want to leave it open to the general public and commit it to handicap, or do we want to produce more handicap and reduce our parking?
I don't want to reduce any parking downtown where, we're challenged in that respect already, so. I was just wondering if there was room there.
okay. Councillor Price?
Yes, thank you, and I'm sure there'll be more discussion, because I definitely do agree it's a problem. I just wonder whether there is an opportunity for a drop-off, a handicap drop-off point, so that if you have somebody with disabilities, you can pull up and drop them off. I've had that problem before, that unless you actually park on the crossing or do something dangerous, you've got somebody who can't move very far and handicap spaces are all full. If you could just even let them out and go park yourself, it may might help it.
That's what the bus stop's for.
You can do that in the bus stop.
Well, that's for the HandyDart bus.
Again, there's no designated drop-off zone or handy-dart spot or anything like that. So, I mean, we could look at doing something like that. My fear is that the Destair House is looking for a longer term. They're looking for that 2-hour period that they're going to come in and enjoy the services of the Destair House, and they want that ease of access that physically impaired people enjoy.
Any further discussion? Councillor Fletcher?
I have been looking more at the back area here and not wanting to reduce any parking, but there's certainly a hedge down there that I wouldn't mind reducing, and it could leave. And I had mentioned if that was possible to increase capacity down below here, but also that the letter indicates the new Marina Hotel project. And I'm just wondering if staff can talk about what might come from that, should that project proceed, and how we might address some of the direct parking.
Marvin, I guess perhaps there's a rebuild, I know, planned for Wilcox, and
Yes, I mean, there was, part of that is a rebuild of Wilcox, and we were looking at where we can get parking on Wilcox. The exact numbers, or I don't know off the top of hand, but I know that we were looking at rebuilding the Wilcox.
And so in that rebuild, we could consider some handy
Well,
sites.
In terms of, at this point of Wilcox, we're pinched for width. We have the existing Destair building, and we're getting pinched with the town Comox building. So I don't believe that we have the room to physically widen Wilcox right there. We were looking at sidewalks, and then we were looking at, in terms of, if I recall correctly, sort of formalizing our parking down just below this building, right, where we start widening out, the pavement starts widening out again. But right up here, which is at the grade with the entrance, the back entrance to the stair, we've got a pinch point left alone.
all right, so not likely any answers there.
No, there would, if we're going to create parking, it's going to be at grade. There'll be a grade step in, because what they don't want.
Right. Okay. Anything further on this? And we are limited by the footprint of the buildings and obviously the slope of the land. But don't forget also that when we expanded the rec center, that was intended to also provide some additional programming for seniors there as well, and that may have more space. So at 5:30 on a weekday, it's pretty packed parking there. But I mean, we are limited in what we can do with the stairs, and we can't really create any more parking unless there's.
We own land across the street, we can maybe
That would be a possibility, although
put another,
it's been perceived as parkland by many for years.
well,
And that's something we can look
we've
at.
got lots of
for-
parkland down here.
Yeah.
I just, it's interesting, you talked about the rec center and the success that it's been, but I just heard a lady today when I said, what do you like about the rec center? So everything except the parking. So we created that issue there too. So.
Not so many fish are boat sunk.
Yeah.
Parking, whether you're in downtown or wherever in a community, is always an issue. So we do what we can with the footprint we have. And yeah, there's perhaps other opportunities that you alluded to see where those go. So for information at this time, and send an appropriate response back. Right? Thank you. So moving on to Lazo Road, shoreline protection report for receipt.
Move receipt.
Thank you. On receipt, all those in favor? Motion is carried. Any questions on the report? Councillor Price.
I'm just, one of my questions is cost. Well, where would the money come from? And obviously, once you've put in protection, it's a lifetime of maintenance. This is, horrendous costs associated with shoreline protection. Are there any thoughts on where the money would come from at this time?
Your worship, it's not in our financial plan as things stand, in terms of the capital costs.
Yeah, and the subsequent recommendation is that we would monitor it and assess it. The costs would obviously have to come from the taxpayers at large, unless there were grant programs available at the time. The recommendation is essentially not to carry out that work at this time, but to continue monitoring it and then reassess it at the end of our current 5-year plan, or sooner if necessary.
Is the Ministry of Transportation still involved there, or there's nobody else we could look to?
No, it's been generously gifted to the town.
My experience of riprap is that it's often hated. So I think, if we have to go down that route, I would hope that, it's mind-boggling to think that we would, that we would look at a similar type of rock. I've heard more objections about riprap than about anything else. And I guess my other question is, would it be, should it happen, and this report definitely speaks to it's going to happen, maybe not this year or next year, but this is, put this on your radar. Would it connect to other existing beach protection? Because my other experience has been that if it doesn't connect, then you just move the problem along, and at the end of what you've done, you create a problem and you create liability and all sorts of things.
Okay.
Go ahead, Public Works. Councillor Price is quite correct in that. And in fact, those are the two areas that are seeing the most erosion. In fact, they're the two areas that are showing any kind of significant erosion, is exactly where our unprotected foreshore meets up with the protected foreshore. So, and that's something that Levelton alluded to, that if we start doing this in phases, it's possible. But you're always going to have this erosion effect where the last phase leaves off. So it's certainly a consideration that if we do it, that we would connect through to the other existing protected areas, and that you would try, if at all possible, to complete it in one foul swoop. On the issue of the riprap and not being a set of the reason, that's agreed. But I think that we would win something in the fact that we would be trying to create that room for the multi-purpose path and solidify the sand dune ecological area that's there right now. So there would be a benefit in the long run to the town, but I just don't know where we get $940,000 right now. That's long.
Okay. Anything further on that? So at this point, we just received the report, but there are two subsequent recommendations which we can deal with together or separately.
I'll move those recommendations.
Thank you. Sure. And any further discussion on those recommendations? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. And then presumably we'll let Mr. Everett know. Yes, okay. Page 59, as requested of the strategic plan process, our planner has provided a series of OCP implementation steps for our information, so a motion to receive that would be in order.
Move receipt.
Second.
Receipt then, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Our planner is here for any questions in regards to that. For those of you who don't remember what we did at OCP, that's the complete list as far as I remember, but there may be more.
Just a quick one. Amending the zoning bylaws would require a public hearing, wouldn't it?
An amendment to a zoning bylaw that's in agreement with the OCP does not by law require a public hearing. You can do a waiver of public hearing. You do a notice on that. In practice, those waivers are only primarily utilized for more or less housekeeping or text amendments. And in the town's case, we have also, in terms of routine rezoning, such as secondary suites. So our practice would be for major rezoning, even if it's in agreement with the OCP, to have a public hearing, but that is not required by statute.
Councillor Fletcher.
So many of these items have been completed. So will we bring this, as we look at our strategic plan tonight, are we going to look at it with this in mind and take some of the items on it that have not been tasked, not been completed?
Some of them are work plan items, but I think our CAO would we could include, as required, specific items if they weren't otherwise included on work plan. Right. Our strategic plan is more of a higher level thing. These may be more work plan oriented, but yes, I think that's the intent. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, and we'll move on. We dealt with H already by referring it back to staff, as you know. So we're now to correspondence. Inspector Gray's reports from October through December for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second. All those in favor? Motion carried. As you know, he's retired, and his replacement has been named. However, I don't think he's arrived yet. I was at a meeting this morning for the Purple Ribbon campaign, and he hasn't quite shown up yet. So we'll await his appearance, hopefully, at a upcoming Committee of the whole. Page 77 is a matter that came across the email looking for a motion of support for provincial investments in rural cycling infrastructure. And so I know we've done a number of things with respect to cycling infrastructure that we, in some cases, are referred to as a somewhat rural community. So, and it does tie into the urban networks that we've established. So if council wishes, we can provide, consider passing a similar motion.
I would so move.
All right, so Councillor Price, and is there a seconder?
Second.
Okay, and any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. So we'll forward that along. And we are now at the strategic plan discussion and draft. Starting at page 79, I want to thank staff for pulling that together in relatively short order. And we have it here for discussion this evening with an idea of adding to it or perhaps fine-tuning it. It could be also further discussed at subsequent meetings, although I suppose we should try to finalize it in the near future. And there's also the intention to do a cover letter with it, which would incorporate some of the other values and statements that tie into our, essentially what would otherwise be a mission statement. So Councillor Grant.
So, one of the items that we put on there, and of course when you want it, you can't find it, but, was to densify downtown, but we never really put any action items behind that or what we were going to do. We left it as a goal, I guess, rather than, and that was to be developed later. So at what point would we look at doing that?
CAO?
We've added a couple of items. One
On page 80.
Consultation with the property
Oh,
owner.
that was-
Oh,
I know,
So we've got the goal. A couple of the actions are reducing the parking requirements and consulting with the owners and stakeholders to review potential barriers to redeveloping the downtown core.
Okay.
Those are a couple of the actions I've put in for 2012.
okay. I know why I don't see it, because I don't have that page. That's why I don't see it. All right.
That would help.
Anyway, it's blank on that. There you go. Anyway, so one thing that we had discussed at some point, I think when we were talking about the little church, was things like tax holidays, those kinds of things, and I think other discussions around our DCCs and what we're charging in our downtown core might be relevant as well to getting some development happening at a more rapid rate.
I saw that as perhaps an outcome or even an agenda topic for the discussion with stakeholders to see if it is a potential barrier. Because you know, one of the things we've discussed at a staff level is you could look at a tax holiday or a reduction in DCCs. And you know, depending on whether you're a property owner or a tenant, the benefits can go different.
Okay, so maybe it wouldn't hurt to, though, add under that consultation item brackets, we review our DCCs and tax exemptions.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
I just
remember-
don't want them to be forgotten as
No,
we have
no,
the discussions, that's all.
We talked about them as recently as this afternoon.
Okay.
I don't know, I may have missed some, so if anybody
No,
else-
that's a good start. This is a work in progress. Anybody else? Councilor Fletcher?
Well, just referencing back to the report on the OCP implementation, the pages 59 through 63. In particular, on the infill for downtown, there was the piece to amend the zoning bylaw to allow for a maximum of 4 stories. That was pieces that we had, and that would go hand in hand with increasing density. And so I don't know how that fits in.
Planner?
Certainly, on the, quickly, what page are you on?
On page 60, sorry.
Page 60?
And it's about 4th from the bottom. Fifth.
The bottom one. Oh, from the bottom one. Okay, so what we advise people now, if they're looking in the downtown area, most of the properties there are zone C 4.1, so that gives a 3-story, more or less a 3-story maximum, that the OCP allows for 4 stories and in some cases even higher in the downtown, and that through the rezoning process, we would then, in terms of in conjunction with the development permit, customize the zone then to go up higher.
We're not talking about pre-zoning, we're saying on an application basis.
So it'd be an application, so in effect, we're implementing that and, well, we're advising people of that and we'll implement that in conjunction with development. So it's an ongoing.
Okay.
I've been thinking a little bit about Hugh's walk around the golf course downtown sort of thing to me, and I think it's a good idea, but to me, it has to be the linkage to a larger, to other trails and other things. It needs to be a piece of a trail, not the entire trail. And when I read this, it sort of hints at that. And again, it's another one of those things where, like, I can see it coming down and being able to get to Philburg. From Philburg, you can get over to McDonald Woods and up and through and all of that. So just as a piece all on its own, it's kind of a small little piece, and I don't know how useful in the long run that would be, but as a piece of a bigger puzzle, I think it's a pretty useful thing. So I think that's got to be connected in here some way, that it would be a piece of an overall trail network.
Well, we could add the words connecting with existing heritage walkway and greenways.
That would, something like that, just so that we don't, people don't get the idea that we're going to put this little jog around the golf course and then we're done.
No, I know, because we did talk about Cottonwood Lane and other things, so we could add the words and greenways after heritage walkway. Is that sufficient? Councillor Price?
Yes, I think that's good, and I think there was a very strong feeling of a vision of a trail network throughout the town, and linkages is very important, looking at what exists, how does it link up, and going up into the Comox Northeast Woods, looking at improvements up there.
Right, so maybe rather than when we say linking Marina downtown and waterfront parks, we should say Marina downtown, waterfront and parks. Does that sound better?
If I can, is
Yeah.
one of the things that attracted me to this idea of this visit was to help for the revitalization of downtown, was to bring people from outside the community here to do the walks, like people go to the air park and do a walk there, and it ending up in downtown so that it may enhance businesses and et cetera there. So, and I'm all for the other walkways throughout the community, absolutely. But what I didn't see here when I looked at it was that it'd be part of vitalizing the downtown and being part of that. And I certainly wasn't opposed to connecting with the existing heritage walkway, but along with Tom's idea too, is that it be an attraction for outsiders to come here to do that walk, just like we're influenced to go elsewhere to do walk.
No, I mean, it's under the general category of vitalization and marine enhancements, so it's an action item under those, or goal, sorry, with action items. I think by referencing parks, we include basically every potential park and greenway that we have, not just necessarily waterfront parks. So, any other comments, questions? Councillor Swift.
I have a question under the planning application timelines and process. When we were doing this, we took kind of a best guess at the amount of time that it would take to do rezoning and so on. Is this in fact an improvement, these ones stated here, or I guess I'm looking for information.
Yes.
Is this an improvement?
It costs you more.
We've identified something, but I don't know if it's
Yes.
if we've hit the mark.
It would be an improvement. The only one that I've got a little bit of the interesting is on the rezoning 6 to 8 months. 8 to 10. I mean, just in terms of your processing time, minimum processing time, and to meet your statutory requirements. But other than that, yes, they're very, that would be a marked departure from where we're at right now.
So staff would bring back to us as part of this, a report on how they're going to get there.
Right. I just didn't know because we were, I'm guessing a little bit. And then the second point was to develop a clear application process with checklists if necessary. I'd like something as part of that checklist to be the cost. So that-
Sorry?
To be the cost involved, so that when people came back, they didn't think they were done and then, oh, now we've got to have this done and that done. So that not only what they need to have done, but the cost would be per done.
So a clear application process with checklists as required and clear understanding as to cost.
Yeah.
Now, costs can vary. I mean, some of those costs will be ours, some of them will be the developers, depending on how they do the thing. So that we don't always know.
Our costs,
Our costs you're talking about?
I think so.
Oh, no, I'm talking about the person that's coming to apply for something. The applicants. Yeah.
The application fees, or are you talking about the
Their
cost?
fees or whatever they need for their studies and surveys.
Okay, well, I guess, planner, can you comment if you can provide some clarity there?
Certainly, I mean, what we could do is, our primary one is our application fees. In terms of if a study is required, those are borne by the applicant, but there's no way of predetermining the cost on those. A lot of it depends on the complexity of the issue being done. But we can identify that where in the process a study may be required. The other fees that they're typically going to be associated with the studies are their actual drawings. And that's something, again, we have no way of even estimating those because it's so much dependent upon the level of complexity. So if we have a development variance permit from, it's relatively simple from a homeowner, we take an existing sketch plan of their foundation and then we just hand dot the area to spend 30 feet. Other ones, you do with a downtown drawing like that, downtown new building, you do a whole set of architectural drawings.
So if we had the words with checklists and cost estimates.
With application, yeah, application costs.
Application costs?
Yes, that means
Is that sufficient, Councillor Swift?
Yep, that's good, thank you.
Anything further? Councillor Fletcher?
Under the, back to the OCP implementation on page 82, when I went through that list, I had a desire to see that the items that allowed and addressed for infill capacity, that they could be given priority, so that, and I don't know how the rest of council feels, but I would like to see that they prioritize the infill action items.
You might have to be more specific.
Which ones? Well, when I look at page 60, the second one from the top says low-rise apartments. Next one below that says...
But again, that's going to be only in conjunction with development applications, right?
I mean, we have no other land or anything. I mean, we're busting at the seams now, so isn't everything that comes going to be infill almost? So if you start prioritizing, there's no prioritizing if they're all the same, right?
Go ahead.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that we ensure that we have the tools to support infill and that. So if these items here, if we update the zoning bylaw to now a new minimum lot size, maybe that will help with infill. Maybe if we amend the zoning bylaw to enable coach houses, maybe that will allow. So if we get those items addressed and that staff have those tools ready and working, then maybe more opportunity.
They're already identified as short-term. What, very short-term? Because that means
Well,
this year and next.
Well, I mean, what we presently have is prioritize these items. So I'm saying, well, if I were to prioritize these items, those are the ones I'd like to see come first and foremost.
Okay. Planner, maybe you can comment?
Certainly. This was generated on the assumption that that in terms of priorities, one of the big primary priorities is getting our processing times down. So that's what we're working on right now. You're seeing a flurry of applications coming for you. So we're trying to clear that backlog. Then we took a look at two other major projects that are on our list, which is the Northeast Comox, which isn't an infill project, but staff have interpreted that as having a high priority to get the stormwater management issues
resolved in that area. So that's the one we were talking about earlier today in terms of the 99 lots and the 20 lots in that corridor. So that's a major project, and we also have the subdivision servicing bylaw on it. So with those as also in that mix, we have tried to be as aggressive as we can. So we are proposing to bring in the secondary suite bylaw before council to legalize secondary suites and single-family dwellings this year. In terms of coach houses, I believe we have that. It would be overly optimistic I think coach houses we do have either on the short term or on the long term. The long term would mean essentially next year. So we're already a couple months, 2 months into this year. The short term will only take us to the end of 2012.
Okay.
Time frame.
So if we attach this list that's on page 659 through 61 to the strategic plan, would that be appropriate? Or reference that list somehow? I'm not sure we want to attach it, but as long as we refer to it.
It was designed to be able to fit in. That's why the same timelines are put in.
Yeah, to see, we want to make this user-friendly too, so.
I think that we would probably be able to cover off Councillor Fletcher's issues in the, under the heading of OCP implementation. In that section, we can provide kind of an introductory statement about the priorities for infill, as outlined in the OCP. I think that would be a good place to cover it.
General statement.
Because combined with this, then there'll be a departmental work plan that will be generated that will also refine it a little more.
So we can reference back to the emphasis on infill, densification, and the OCP.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll include that wording. Anything further? No.
Just looking
Unless
at
it's
the
just a
past,
typo or
at the past plan, just wondering, our organics collection program was something that we were really highly focused on, and the affordable housing, and we have that affordable housing reserve fund. Just if I could just understand where those two fit in or don't fit in.
Theo.
Working at lightning speed, I guess, one joke with the organics collection, we have some almost positive news in that our contractor, our garbage contractor, is working with another company to look at a pilot project, and potentially, I mean, we've offered up the town, the whole town, as a potential pilot area, and we actually may hear something back in the next few weeks about what the possibilities are to set that up.
It's on our management report still.
Okay.
So
Just wondered if we needed to keep it in the strategic plan to keep it alive.
we see it as an operational item at this stage. We keep pushing at the regional district level, expressing our interest and wanting to get on with it. So I think it's well recognized that we want to get moving.
And the OCP does recognize affordable housing as a desire as well.
Can we go it alone on organics collection?
The information that our garbage contractor has provided is, even to run a pilot, they need essentially all of the town of Comox for the material to run. And we're looking at doing it through the regional district, so we'd almost be going it alone for the first phase. And it would be then to see if Courtney and Campbell River...
Are you saying going alone without the regional district?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think there's solid waste, you have to follow a regional solid waste management plan.
That's what I was getting at.
I think you're having that tomorrow discussion.
That would be lovely.
All right.
30.
Okay, so anything further? If not, then CEO will fine-tune this further and bring it back to council for adoption. Thank you. Good work, everyone.
Motion to adjourn.
No, we have a new camera.
Yeah, we need a motion to exclude the public under Section 9 of the Community Charter and for an in-camera meeting, so move to that effect, please.
So moved.
Seconded, all in favor, carried, we'll adjourn briefly.